beloved, even though you didn't know this, but he's most beloved for sculpting an audio animatronic Disney figure that was not created for Disney theme park use. What would it be? Chris Mueller sculpted the parrot. So, a little salute to a wonderful artist whose work across the decades have helped make Disneyland and Disney theme parks and Disney movies just a little bit more beautiful and enchanting. Now, one attraction that Walt alluded to in his introduction to Fantasyland, which was not here opening day, was Alice in Wonderland. Alice followed a few years later and opened in 1958. It was a ride through, of course, through the motion picture, but just like Alice in Wonderland itself was a problematic story to adapt to the screen because Lewis Carroll's book is so rambling, so too was the movie difficult to adapt into an attraction, because where would you go? What adventures would you choose? So they finally narrowed it down to a few, some that were in the movie and some that weren't. But to give you a little glimpse at the way the Alice in Wonderland attraction was from 1958 until 1981. I have a little bit of audio to share with you from the original Alice soundtrack. And as today, with our new attraction audio from 1984, in 1958, as always, Alice was voiced by the original voice of Alice in the film, Catherine Beaumont. So brace yourself for a couple sound effects here. And here's a little snippet of the original Alice in Wonderland attraction.
My adventures in Wonderland began when I followed the white rabbit down the rabbit hole. All of a sudden, I fell down. The next thing I knew, I was in the upside-down room, with the floor where the ceiling should be. I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then I found myself in a beautiful garden of live flowers.
That was a dandelion. Now, the upside-down room was not in the motion picture. I think that was inspired by the fact that when Alice finally lands at the bottom of the rabbit hole, her feet are caught in a little grate, and so she sees the room upside down for a moment before she rights herself. But this upside-down room postcard is a marvelous view, so I thought I would show you an upside-down view of the upside-down room so that you could enjoy the art direction just a little bit in a way that you really never could if you experienced that attraction. So, after that trip to Wonderland, who's thirsty? Let's run over and grab some Welch's grape juice. Oh, goodness. Welch's grape juice was located just beside the Snow White attraction in Fantasyland, and they had a marvelous concoction of frozen treats and on-fountain grape juice. It was terrific. But the main key attraction, and something which I remember very fondly gazing at for as long as my parents would let me, was the beautiful mural behind the service counter. This piece of art was inspired by Fantasia from the Pastoral Symphony, of course, where they do the Bacchanalian grape harvest and things. And this was a mural painted and designed by Frank Armitage, an imaginary legend, and Ivan Earle. So it's a kind of slightly mid-century modern take on the 1940s Disney Pastoral Symphony look, but with an especially grapey flair. But just another beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece of art created especially for Disneyland. So if we have our Welch's grape juice, we're not allowed to go on any attractions yet, so we'd better go shopping till we're done. And that means we'll go over to the Fantasy Shop, which very shortly after the opening of Disneyland became known as the Tinkerbell Toy Shop, and today is known as the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. But also, across the way, across the courtyard, you could go to Merlin's Magic Shop. Very famously, Steve Martin was one of the demonstrators there. And they had all kinds of little nooks and crannies in this little castle room, which is now the heraldry store. And sometimes there were wires crisscrossing the ceiling. At the other end, at one end, I should say, would be like a little rubber tarantula, and at the other would be a prankish magic demonstrator. So you never knew what would happen or what would drop on your head when you went into Merlin's Magic Shop. Now, the Fantasyland Theater that many of you remember was located where Pinocchio's Daring Journey is now, and it showcased for years and years and years many different Disney cartoons, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, a program of short cartoons, but the very first thing showcased there, which opened in 1956, was a movie featuring television's original Mouseketeers. Now, the Mouseketeers went on the air. The Mickey Mouse Club was first seen in October of 1955. But they made their first public and televised appearance here on opening day, July 17th of 1955. I know of Art Linkletter, when he's calling out the different floats and exhibits that go by in the Disneyland opening day parade, says, "Oh, look, and it's the performing children." Yes, he didn't quite know what they were, and then he consulted the script, said that they're Mouseketeers. So nobody really knew what this was going to be. But the Mouseketeers made their performing debut by cascading out of the doors of the Mickey Mouse Club Theater and into Fantasyland and doing their very first dance number. So just a year later, in 1956, you can see Mouseketeers Sherry, Eileen, Jack, and Kevin, who's better known as Moochie, Kevin Corcoran, outside the Mickey Mouse Club Theater. They were showcased in a wonderful way. The Mouseketeer 3D Jamboree opened there, and this was not only a film with the Mouseketeers, but it was in full Technicolor, and it was in 3D. So the Mouseketeer 3D Jamboree, sadly, is not something that you can see very easily today, because there aren't really many places where you can see 35mm 3D films. It was an extravaganza, and the only footage of the Mouseketeers that was shot at the studio in full Technicolor. Sadly, I can't show it for you today either, but I have managed to trap a few little images to show you of what this production looked like. First of all, you had two existing Disney animated shorts folded into the Mouseketeer footage. One was called Working for Peanuts, starring Donald Duck and Chip and Dale, and the other was Melody, which was a precursor to Toot, Whistle, Plunk, and Boom. But those shorts were made and released theatrically during the early 50s when the first 3D craze went in. But as a framework for this, you had the Mouseketeers themselves. This was shot on the famous Disney Studios Stage 1, where the Mickey Mouse Club itself was filmed. The original Mickey Mouse Club Mouseketeer drapes were there, of course. And they used a lot of their regular set pieces in this, but it was 3D, and it was 3D for kids, so the illusions were fast and furious. Annette Funicello was there. She sang a song, which was a song that actually had been performed here at Disneyland in the Mouseketeer Circus, and she was on a swing and would come out and swing towards you in 3D and throw a rose out at the audience. So great, great illusion. Jimmy Dodd had a bucket full of water to throw at the camera. It looks like Roy Williams behind him there had already gotten a pie in the face. Lonnie Burr there as the photographer did a Watch the Birdie, and the music was supplied by the Mouseketeer Orchestra. So a beautiful film that you never know might have a renaissance someday, what with technology going on. But as with all 3D motion pictures, you had to do something at the very end of the presentation. So let's see what all good Mouseketeers heard as they left the 3D Jamboree.
Mouseketeers, this is Jimmy Dodd again. Sure hope you enjoyed our 3D Jamboree and that you'll tell your friends to come and see us. Oh, and by the way, please leave your 3D glasses in the lobby. You see, these glasses are made especially for 3D and aren't to be used as sunglasses. Thanks for visiting us, and have fun now and enjoy yourselves.
I would bet that that recording has not been played here within the Disneyland berms since 1963. Neat, huh? Well, now let's leave the 3D Jamboree and go across the way behind the Dumbo attraction to Storybook Land. Storybook Land was not ready for opening day, not by a long shot. In fact, the attraction was first called Canal Boats of the World. And if you went on it, what you saw was what the world is made of, which is, so I heard someone say it, dirt, basically, yes. They had been so busy planting the jungle for the Jungle Cruise, too, that poor Storybook Land, or Canal Boats of the World, really didn't have much going on, but it was a lovely little boat ride on these very dear little canal boats. So that was remedied very quickly. Casey Jr., of course, was part of that area, as he still is, and they put the Imagineers to work to populate Storybook Land with beautiful miniatures that would represent the homes and environments of some of the Disney motion pictures. Walt himself collected miniatures, and he was very, very fond of small things. He even built a replica of Granny Kincaid's cabin from the film So Dear to My Heart, which he displayed at state and county fairs with the hope of maybe making a big exhibition out of this. But never really got to do all of that he wanted to because he was so busy with everything else. But Storybook Land, I think, was the best manifestation in a big public way of Walt thinking that miniatures and small things were very charming, and I agree. But I would like to share with you what I think is some of the best footage of Storybook Land from its original opening period. This was shot in 1956 and was included as part of the 1957 CinemaScope People and Places travel documentary, Disneyland USA. So let's get on our little boat and go to Storybook Land.
Monstro the Whale is a permanent resident in Fantasyland. His monstrous grin is an open invitation to one and all to enter an enchanted world where fairy tales come true. This is Storybook Land, and the pilot of our boat will help us recall all the fond memories of childhood.
Our first story brought to life is that of the famous Three Little Pigs. Here are their houses, the one of straw, the one of sticks, and the wolf-proof one of bricks. Ratty's riverbank house and Mr. Toad's magnificent mansion recalls the story of Wind in the Willows. Or, watch for the low bridges. And once upon a time, Cinderella followed this winding road to meet her Prince Charming in this castle where they lived happily ever after. Over the 7 hills, past the 7 waterfalls, lies the forest cottage of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Jr. is the busiest character in Storybook Land. Near this English cottage, under the oak tree, Alice began her adventures in Wonderland. The mill with the white sails is the hero of the story, the old mill. And up ahead, among those Swiss Italian Alps, lies Pinocchio's village. Often rain fell in the little village, but this time our weatherman happens to be a gardener.
A really good view at some of those things. They're just beautiful. You'll notice that Toad Hall used to be on the promontory point, which is now occupied by the palace in the city of Agrabah from Aladdin. Toad had a relocation in the mid-1990s to the place where he was today. Also, you'll notice too that the guides on the little boats were not always exclusively ladies, as they were for so many years. They had gentlemen at the beginning. So a lot of things change, but Storybook Land still remains charming and the same. So I'm glad we can showcase that. Another thing that remains charming and the same, I think, is Sleeping Beauty Castle, which is the centerpiece of not only Fantasyland, but also Disneyland. It's no coincidence that it became the iconic symbol of